It's another beautiful Sunday afternoon. This is Robbie Minds. Welcome. My name is Ebuka Obiuchendo. Thanks a lot for joining us. We're about 2 weeks, about 17 days away from the kickoff of campaigns officially for the 2023 general elections. A lot of the candidates have been making silent or covert moves in the last couple of weeks and months, but from the 28th of September, everything will be let open. We'll see the results of all the conversations that have been held. The PDP is still in their quagmire with regards to the chairman of the party being asked to step down by certain members of the party. The APC continues to convince Nigerians that choosing two candidates regardless of religion or tribe is the perfect sell. The Labour Party continues to have the structure question being thrown at them, and of course all the other candidates in the race. But elections, of course, are beyond just the presidential candidates. We have other levels of government running for office, and certain issues will continue to be a hot topic. The economy is very big on many people's minds at the moment, and we did hear from the Minister of Finance saying about 11 trillion naira, that's a T, will be borrowed to sort of fund the 2023 fiscal budget for Nigeria. We're already in a borrowing mess by a lot of standards, and Nigerians are wondering where that leaves the incoming government from May next year, if they're going to be thrown into what is a deep hole of debt. I have a special guest here with me who's a financial consultant to help us understand what the year ahead holds for Nigerians. Jonathan Eke-Olumba is here with me. Thanks for being here today.
Yeah, I think it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
Help us understand where we are at the moment. A lot of Nigerians basically understand what they feel on the streets. We understand that everything is completely out of reach now. Basic things, food, clothing, there's almost no disposable income for anybody anymore. Let's not even go into the conversation of what's happening with the Naira. So these are what Nigerians see. But the government continues to talk about, borrowing even more. What does that mean for me, for the guy on the street, for the average Nigerian who is already in the fix?
Okay, I think this is a very interesting question you've asked, but let me share some perspectives. So this is our 7th year running a deficit budget, which essentially means that the amount of revenues you can generate is quite lower than what we need to spend. And if you compare Nigeria with a couple of African economies like South Africa, like Kenya, like even Ghana, the expenditure per capita, which really refers to how much expenditure can go to one individual, is actually quite very low, even with the fact that we have this deficit that we need in terms of financing the budget. So I think it's quite apt when you say how much of a problem is this? Does this look like a chaos? I think that there are quite a lot of positives when you look at funding a budget through borrowings, which is why we have a lot of deficit. But it remains, I think the bigger question is, how essentially will the funds be utilized? I think to the extent that, we see the funding going to the right places, then we can begin to see the trickle-down effect of some of these things on the average Nigerian on the street.
I think that's also a very fundamental point, because government continues to tout its infrastructure drive. We're hearing about train stations being opened everywhere, train tracks are opening, bridges have been built, airports are probably being commissioned. Is that supposed to have some sort of long-term effect on the Nigerian? Because people don't seem to be able to relate that to what's happening with their pockets. And we might see more of that in the coming budgets, where infrastructure there's a heavy spend on that. Is that what Nigerians need?
So really to restructure the economy in terms of generate the potentials that the economy really can achieve, I think the easiest way to look at it is infrastructure drives the foundation of economic stimulation. And when there's infrastructure, you're able to attract investments, right? So for example, if you think around how people can move about with goods and services, I think it's really down to infrastructure. Also, if you think about how to attract customers in a diverse nation like this, I think some of this infrastructure you've listed really is very critical, very fundamental. And let's be clear about this, that many investors really somewhat look at the direction of our investment in infrastructure as a sign, to what's in it for them when they think about the operating cost of running a business in Nigeria. So they think about our infrastructural development, how easy is it, to be able to attract the potentials that this market has. And infrastructure really, it's a picture to just somewhat, show, what is in it for them, really.
Yeah. I want to talk subsidies now, because that's a very big problem. And it looks like government is caught between the devil and the deep blue sea. You take away subsidies, it affects Nigerians even more, because we know what's going to happen with pricing. And if subsidy on fuel, on education, there's a lot of things are subsidized by government. And government is starting to talk about the fact that we need to stop this to be able to focus on what our job really is. The petroleum products conversation seems almost inevitable at this point
Yeah.
because we're hearing figures around 6 trillion being allocated to just subsidies alone.
Yeah.
Education, you can have an argument for and things like that. What's the future on that, you think? How does this affect an incoming government that might be faced with the fact that they have to now do this, especially at the start of their administration?
Okay, so I think that's a double-edged question you've asked. So the first one is around, the role of subsidies and, the devil around, subsidies as a recurring pattern in our budget. So actually for this budget, there are two scenarios, right? So scenario one is where we look at, the budget being business as usual. We're going to have, petroleum subsidy, go on for a full year. And that's pegged at 6.62 trillion, right, for petroleum subsidy. There's also another scenario, which is, to just have it till the end of this government. So if I would say, for 6 months, into 2023, and that should come to us something around 3.32 trillion. The real argument is, so there's the case for subsidy. There are conversations around where should the subsidy go into, right? I like the fact that you've spoken about education as an area we can look at subsidizing. Interestingly, the vice president was in America sometime last week, and there was a commitment from the World Bank to say, look, we would support you as Nigeria in terms of, eliminating subsidy you carry for petroleum, and actually would help by protecting the vulnerables, which is really subsidizing, people in terms of their lifestyle, especially the most vulnerable, the lowly placed in the society. So I think that if you really ask me, it seems to me really like there's a political element to that conversation around having the petroleum, subsidy, the removal. Yes, there's the Petroleum Industry Act, which really was somewhat supposed to be like a signpost to looking at, subsidies eventually being phased out. But the reality is this really the right time? That's my sense, when I look at the amount of energy going into should subsidy be removed on petroleum as at now. But I think we need subsidy. Should it be petroleum subsidy? I don't know. I like the arguments around subsidizing education, given what is happening now with ASU. But I think what it really appears to me is we might see subsidy for the first 6 months. That's for me what I think is more realistic.
Yeah, I think the Minister of Finance said about June 2023,
so,
which is when the new government is in.
So that's why I said you can't divulge away, politics from this sort of conversation. But I think we might see for the first 6 months, and then I think the new government who will come in will be in a very big position to determine what will be the future of subsidy on petroleum.
I've heard a lot of numbers being bandied. I think one that stuck with me was about 500 naira or so to a litre of fuel if the subsidy goes away. What does that mean for me and you if we have to buy fuel for 500 naira plus for a litre? What does that mean for the price of food, for just everything?
Okay, so the argument is that's the real price, right? So maybe 400 to 500. The argument is that's the real price. And so we are subsidizing that price currently. Now, so are we feeling the effects, in terms of, has that made the lives of people a lot easier since then? So the argument is if we take away the subsidy on petroleum and let people pay the real price and then fund, directly. So for example, if you think about things like, education like we've been speaking about, or even social amenities, maybe subsidizing transport, or subsidizing means of, access to even getting basic finance. I think the argument is the real price is around 400 to 500, but are we feeling the impact? So do we change the direction of how we look at subsidy? And so if we say fuel price should come into something like 400 to 500, and then we're able to fund people directly, especially the most vulnerable, for me, that's really where I see the biggest impact. Are we going to have a different sense of how much this will be in terms of even things like inflation? So is it working for us? I don't know. Currently, with the subsidy going on, so fuel is currently anything around 160 to 180. Is it really working? So will there be a difference if we decide to say, let's fund people's lifestyles directly, or fund critical areas that affect the poor, and then, allow the natural price just take effect? But bear in mind that, across African countries as well, too, I think the price you've just quoted, and if you look at the exchange rates difference, I think that's really the kind of price you see across Africa, really.
I want to talk about, our fiscal year generally.
Yeah.
There's been an argument about, an outgoing government imposing a budget on a new administration. People have argued about the fact that maybe we should have a financial year that starts around July. So that the government is in May, you have a month or two, and then you can. Do you think that makes sense? Do you think, what happens now? Because we have a budget usually where there's a good year, we have 50% implementation,
actually,
which is an overreach. on many levels. And then now you have a government that's going to pass a budget in December and be out in May, on a new government that's supposed to start in May. Do you think we should start thinking about, is that a valid conversation to have, if that changes anything?
Interestingly, this change to the fiscal year of January to December is quite recent. In fact, it started about the last 3 to 4 years that we had this change in fiscal year. So there are benefits with aligning the budget year to the fiscal year. It helps to even look at how planning should go. I think for me, the way I look at the conversation around should there be a switch for a new government will be to even ask ourselves, have we performed really in past years? You said 50%. Actually, 50% is on the revenue side, right? Actually. On the expenditure side, we are doing about 90%. So we really have been doing well in terms of how we spend, but it's on the revenue side. I think that, to be honest, the conversation should be about strong financial controls, just ensuring that, the budget works, ensuring that there's a lot of accountability, on the part of people who should, because for all intent and purpose, I think the idea around, aligning the budget to fiscal year makes sense, for planning purposes. But if the financial controls are very strong, if people do what they should do rightly, there's a lot I know that's happening. For example, the ICPC, the budget office, is working together with the heads of the ministries, the departments and agencies to just ensure budget implementation is happening. I think if we can achieve that, then at least we might have this conversation much fairly. I think so. But for me, let's strengthen the controls around how we spend money as a country, also how we also generate revenue vis-a-vis targets. I think that area is really poor. Just achieving the targets on revenue is really poor. I know that not too long ago, there were threats of sanctions on ministries, departments, and agencies that were not going to meet their targets. So I think, for me, that's more like the immediate thing. Let's just ensure that the budgets are working, are performing, targets are being met. Then we can have the conversation on, should we switch, And so let's see how that works.
What does inflation look to you like in the coming months, and the Naira, which is untouchable at this point? What are your thoughts on where we're headed with that?
So the projections, even for the budget, is something around 17 to 18%.
Which is a lot, but...
I wanted to say that that is quite very high. And it affects the concept of what we call in finance the real growth rate, because the real rate really is when you take away the impact on inflation, or you discount the impact on inflation. I think that inflation would speak to, how we look at, the way we can generate quite a couple of resources, because it affects earning power, like you said. It affects the power of your disposable income. The reality is what it is, that inflation is quite high. Is that, in fact, the last 3 to 4 years has been at double digits, and there's no good news. In fact, even the projection for the next 3 years, because there's a document called the Medium-Term Expenditure Framework, still puts inflation, somewhere around 17 to 18%, even up to 2025. I think that's what we have to deal with. I just think that, let's focus on revitalizing the economy, our revenue, and then we might then look at how we deal with inflation head on.
On a final note, as quickly as you can, looking at the 2023 budget, are you hopeful?
I think there are quite a lot of ways I can look at it, and maybe that's where the conversation on hope can come in. One of the things that came out strongly with the 2023 proposal plans, as I'll call them now, is that there won't be any new projects. The government doesn't want to focus on new projects. They want to ensure that all existing projects are going to be completed. There are exciting projects I'm aware of that's happening around infrastructure. If the government will stick to ensuring that all those projects achieve completion, just maybe it might be nice. And because this is a transition year, really, I think that there will be a lot of focus on completing what's already happening. And then we can then ask ourselves, is this a budget we should be hopeful about? But I do know that in terms of even revenue projection, we are slightly projecting something lower, around 17% lower than what we had for last year. I think we just have to be optimistic. That's how I look at it.
Thank you very much for joining us today. We'll be watching government very closely in spite of all the political distractions that are inevitable. We'll take a break and be back. Please stay with us. Don't just stand there teasing me. Now it's time to show and prove. Welcome back to the show. It's time for us to talk entertainment, and I have a special guest here with me, a good friend of mine, but a very good actor, if I say so myself. This is the only time you'll hear me say it, though. Daniel Etim Effiong, how are you doing?
Hey, how
People call you Etim a lot.
Yes, they do.
But it's not your name.
It's my name.
It's
my
your name or
middle
your
name.
surname?
Yeah, no, it's my middle name.
Yeah.
So my name is Daniel. My middle name is Etim, and my last name is Effiong. What I've done is for my family, like your dad did.
With
I've added Etim to my last name for my
Okay.
kids and my wife, so they are Etim Effiong.
Okay.
Yes. But my first name is Daniel. My middle name is Etim.
Interesting. Was that a conundrum for you when you were trying to get into acting? Because I know people will try to use names that would stand out. And professionally, you don't use Daniel a lot. I see a lot of Etim Effiong's in credits.
Right, yeah, because when I started off, also as a creative, behind the camera, as a writer, director, producer, I wanted something that sounded a bit more different, a bit more Nigerian, a bit more African and arty, that whole idea
He's authentic.
of art, exactly, authentically African,
Yeah.
So I used to go for Etim Effiong, as a brand name. But then later I said, Daniel is a cool name as well, so I'll go with the full name, Daniel Etim Effiong.
Yeah.
So that's what I go by.
This your acting dream, I know you did go to film school, but before that, you studied
Chemical engineering.
chemical engineering. What's happened to that? Was it ever a plan, or did you just study it because that's what JAMB gave you?
Yeah,
Like
I
you say?
studied it because I was great at it. After secondary school, I did the sciences in secondary school, and my teachers were like, you have to do engineering or one of those courses, professional courses, and I opted for chemical engineering because there were members of my family who were in the oil and gas industry that set the trail for us, blazed the trail for us. So we're like, okay, we're going to go into oil and gas. Yeah, so that's what I did. And I was in oil and gas for 2-3 years, and I was like, I wasn't getting satisfaction from it or fulfillment, and I said, because I was also doing art on the side, so I'd go to my 9 to 5, but in the evenings I'll go to Bogobiri for open mic and do all this spoken word and stuff, and then I'd have some acting gig on the side. So I just felt, that gave me more fulfillment, and every time I did it, the response was always great. The feedback was like, Daniel, you're great at this, why aren't you doing it full time? So I had a little chat about it with my folks and decided I was going to do it full time.
That looks like a tough call to make, because thinking at the time, Nollywood,
Yeah.
oil and gas,
Yeah. Yeah.
what was the driving force behind? Passion is great.
It
but at the same
definitely
time,
wasn't
you're also
money.
looking at,
Yeah, it definitely wasn't money. I mean,
did you
it
have a
was-
plan?
Kind of. At the time, so I had tried and failed to make the switch before. When I was in university, I had told my folks, I felt that heavy, drive and passion for entertainment. And I told my parents that I was going to quit engineering in my second or third year and go study theater art, go start over again. And they thought I was crazy. They had to call family meeting, and they were like, no, Daniel, you're being distracted, focus. So that just killed the dream at the time. Then it came again 2 years into oil and gas, and I knew this time I had to do something different. I didn't tell anyone about it. I just prayed, fasted, and really thought about it, and I said, you know what? Now's the time to make that leap. If you fall or you make a mistake, then you can always come back. But trust me, immediately I took the leap of faith, I've just been flying since after that.
You also have a background in production.
Yes, I do.
Was that your first sort of way in?
No, acting was my first love. I used to act in church, I used to act in school, I used to act at every opportunity I had. But storytelling, production, directing, producing came as a soft landing for me. My first job after I quit engineering was a 9 to 5 with Ndani TV as a content producer. So that was soft landing because it was structured salary and all of that. And I used that to convince my folks. I was like, I quit my job, but hey, I got another job, 9 to 5, structured salary, but as a content producer with Ndani TV. So that's where all my production experience came from. Then I went to film school in South Africa, where I studied writing and directing. And then after that, went on to do TV commercials, sign up with an agency. So my production life was existing in parallel to my being in front of camera life, of my acting career.
We'll take a quick break and come back. Please stay with us.
Get with you. Don't just stand there teasing me. Now it's time to show and prove.
Welcome back to the show. If acting is your first love, why writing and directing? Does it make you a better actor if you know these things?
For me,
Or
it
if you're
gives
good
me
at those
better
things?
fulfillment. Does it make you a better actor? Yes, because then you understand story. you understand story structure, you understand you understand when the director is speaking to you, you understand it a bit more, because you also have the experience of communicating your ideas to an actor, you know. But for me, storytelling is the first love, you know. However, whatever gives me control of story is what I want to do. So directing and writing gives me more creative control of the story. Acting, you have internal control only. You have control of your physical being, of your mind, you know, to deliver what has been given to you by the director.
So you've come into the industry, not necessarily come, but you've become Etim Effiong in the industry at a very interesting time. You know, we're seeing sort of what you can call a revolution in the industry. The streaming platforms are flooding in. We're suddenly seeing collaborations internationally. Movies are showing at international film festivals like yours is about to. But it's also at a time when people are starting to wonder, are these actually actors that are worth their salt? You know, we hear terms like Instagram actors or reality stars who just become actors. You know, people always tell you, nowadays, you know, we had to go through the Asaba and Enugu and, you know, actually grind to get to those points. Do you ever feel like you are at a point where you need to prove yourself to an audience that is very critical of your industry and the kind of actors that we have now? Not that it's a bad thing or the actors are bad, but there's that perception that, oh, this guy's got it easy.
Yeah, I mean, I get that from time to time, but the truth is, if you are a creative, you're a true creative, you know that you can only be true to yourself and the material you're given. We're not creating to impress people. We're not creating to get on some top 10 list or some blog or whatever. Yeah, I mean, it pays to be there, and it pays to have all those perks. But, you know, for me, my first responsibility is to be true to myself and the emotion I'm being asked to portray, you know, and the truer you get to that point, the better off you are as an actor. You know, every new job is an opportunity to be truer to yourself and the material, you know. So that's my goal, that's my challenge every time, to best myself, to be true to what I'm giving. So I think back and, you know, the last job, how true was I to this material, you know, and to the job I'm getting now, you know, how can I be even truer, you know. So that's always it for me, you know. I'm hardly ever concerned about, you know, being compared to other actors or other industries and stuff. I just want to be true to myself. And Aramdi told me something. Sorry to drop that name, but yeah, he told me something. He said, Daniel, he said, you know, like, I mean, and I'm not trying to compare myself to him or anything, but he said, we have nothing to prove. You know, like, we are kings of our storytelling, you know, here and now. You know, we're in Nollywood for such a time as this for a reason. You know, I'm not going to try to be someone else in some other industry. No, it's here and now, and I must be the best that I can right now.
Fair enough. Let's talk about you now and your roles, which have been quite interesting over the years. I mean, and we live in a country where sometimes people don't know when to blur the lines between what is fiction or what is art and what is reality. You know, I would say, this Daniel must really like older women. You know, stories like that. You suddenly, for a while, became the lover boy in a lot of series and TV and movies and all of that. Was that intentional on your part? Because people always say the biggest markets are the women in art, whether you like it or not. Was that intentional on your part to be like, okay, let me pander to these people, get, you know, the wave going, and then see where it takes me? Or were you just typecast a lot?
I think the latter is the case. I wasn't intentional about positioning myself to be a lover boy. On the contrary, I do appreciate other roles that take me out of what I look like. You know, I like playing odd characters, madman, poor man, conductor, you know, all these random roles rather than just be you. You know, sometimes you get a job and director's like, you know, now just be yourself, just be your, you know, you'll be fine, boy. I'm like, no, that's not why I'm here. You know,
It doesn't push me.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't make my creative juices flow. You know, but I think it has happened, and I've embraced it because I keep getting great feedback from the audience, and the truth is, we're doing it for them. You know, what they want is what we give to them. It's a market where there's a trade. You know, you give them and they give you back. So I'm killing it and
Yes,
I'm
you are.
enjoying it.
Very
Yeah.
important. Your wife comes up a lot when people watch these movies, and they're like, "Oh, what does she think?" You don't necessarily speak on it. I don't know why. I mean, it must be personal reasons. But does being married to someone in the industry help? Because, I mean, we've seen a lot of this series. There's a lot of passion sometimes. Does it ever? Is it a conversation you guys have, or does she just understand it? I'm just trying to understand, for people to understand, because people always have something to say when there's a clip
Yeah.
of Etimefyong
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
shows up
Yeah.
in bed or in
Yeah.
a situation
Yeah.
where people are like, but he's also an actor. So how do
Yeah.
you
I mean,
navigate
we talk about it. We talk about it all the time. The safe thing to do is to come and report yourself.
that? Before the movie is
Before
out.
she sees it on screen, so that's what I do. I come and say, I come home, I'm like, okay, I had a really interesting scene today, and this is what happened, but she's in the industry as well, so she understands. I mean, she trained in New York Film Festivals, New York Film School, Film Academy, so she understands the process. She understands what it entails, so we talk about it a lot, and I sort of like shield her from it, So I tell her what she needs to know. Exactly. I won't come and rub in the face like, oh my goodness, you see the scene that I did today. No, absolutely not.
Let's not do that.
None of that. So I'm very open with it as well. When I might be getting into trouble, I report myself. I'm like, okay, so there's a situation we need to talk about, and try to be as open as possible. So yeah, that's how we manage
Do
it.
people cross the line sometimes?
Absolutely.
Whether actors or fans?
Absolutely.
With action?
Yes, that happens more with.
How do you
the-
handle that?
Yeah, more with the fans and the actors, because I like to think all my, colleagues are professional. But how do I handle it? I understand that it's a human thing. I've been on their side of the divide before. I have crushed on actresses before, or even So what I do is I convert them to friends, especially
Try.
for the ones that come really hard.
Friend zone.
Yeah. No, well, so I try to talk them through it and say, like, hey, convert them to friends, introduce them to the family if I must, and just play safe. That's the key for me. What's safe? Have boundaries. Always have boundaries. And I'm learning through the process. I won't claim that I have everything figured out.
Yeah.
I'm learning through it, and I'm getting help as well. Very important.
Are there things you've had to turn down with
terms
this
of-
lover boy?
In terms of roles or advances?
Yes. I want to believe you're turning down advances for your sake. But I'm talking about roles. Are there things, or you've seen, okay, maybe this is a little too far now? Have there been situations like that?
I have turned down roles.
For those reasons is what I'm talking about, where maybe it's you being a lover boy and there are things you have had to do.
Not yet.
And you're like,
And-
okay,
not
nobody's
yet.
asked
Yeah,
for
yeah.
anything crazy.
That
Or
I
you've not
haven't been
been
able
able
to
to
deliver. Yes, I mean, also because I understand also that the industry is at a stage right now that you can shoot something, but you won't be able to show it. Where are you going to show it?
Yeah.
You want to cross lines, you want to, go to the extreme, and you want to be creative, but where are you going to show it? There's the Nigerian Census Board. There are all these people who have stop gaps to protect the audience from some of these things you're creating. You're not going to have a platform for that. So already there are measures in place to protect the audience as well as the actor. So you don't get a lot of really, I haven't gotten a lot of really crazy requests from
If
filmmakers.
the census board was a little more liberal, would you take those roles?
If they're willing to pay for it,
Yeah.
probably I think about it.
And it's not a problem with, your wife is in industry, like you said.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's also the issue of my faith as well, and what my faith accommodates. There's, as long as, I'm not crossing lines with my wife and family, I'm not crossing lines with my faith. And it's art also. And I really believe in expression, in true expression. Does it exist in our society? Do we need to, point a flashlight on it? Then let's tell that story.
Is arts, I feel like arts is used to explain away a lot of things. Is it
Well,
always art though?
Absolutely. Well, it's expression. Art is expression. Does it exist? Do we need to talk about it? Do we need to have conversations about it? Then let's have conversations.
Are you happy with where Nollywood is today? I mean, the talk is always about how Nollywood sort of took off before the music industry. The music industry has It's crazy what's happening there.
Yes,
I mean, not
yes.
to say that Nollywood is
Yes.
not advancing, but are you happy with where we are today? We've talked a lot about structure. Nobody seems to explain what structure really should
Right.
look like. But things are happening, especially with all of these guys coming in now.
Right.
You're happy?
Well, I'm happy. I think we can do a lot more. We can do better. I just think that the industry is a reflection of where the country is right now, per the lack of structure. But the music industry is kind of different. You don't need, filmmaking is capital intensive. You know, you need a village to make a film. To make music, you probably need fewer people, a lot less people to make a track or to make an album. To make a film, you need an entire nation, you know. And it's also very capital intensive. So I understand the struggles. I understand, you know, we have a long way to go, but we'll get there. I think we're a little behind the music industry, but I think we're progressing and we'll get there.
Congratulations on Collision Course. I know it's at the top of the Netflix
Chart.
top 10 chart and all that.
Thank you.
You're also going to be showing at a few festivals, I believe. What did that role do for you? It was different for you on a lot of levels. You know, is that what you mean when you say you like to play those sort of roles? What was it?
Absolutely. First of all, this is one of the few roles I've done that it took a lot for me physically, not just mentally and emotionally. Physically, I was buffeted. I was thrown out of buses. I was dipped in, you know, poop water, you know, in the Lagos Lagoon. It was really hard to film it, physically hard, you know, so it took a lot from me. But the results have been fantastic. The feedback, you know, has been great. I love that people get it and people love it. You know, I've done a couple of films where my character dies in the end, and then, you know, well, not to give spoilers away, but, you know, I just have amazing feedback from the audience. And what he has done for me is it has just put me on a pedestal where people can actually relate, you know, with the role I'm playing. Before now, I just have a group of people who see me as fine boy. Hey, yeah, that's the fine boy. That's the you know, that's the bloke. But now they see me as one of them. They see me as theirs. They have embraced me as a struggling artist, you know, and yeah, I'm really grateful for it.
What's next for you? What should we be looking forward to? You are very busy. I feel like you have a list of things.
Listen,
but
yeah,
what's coming? Maybe in the year, before the end of the year, in the next year, maybe?
There are a number of collaborations coming up. I'm
You
making a
spent
film.
quite some time internationally as well.
Yes. The plan for me is, you know, my brand, what I'm projecting is the African actor, not necessarily Nollywood actor, the African actor. So I like to work across board with South Africans, with Kenyans, you know, even Ghanaians, sisters, you know. So yeah, lots of international collaborations. Also, I'm looking at directing my own film. So I'm working on that, you know, fingers crossed it happens end of this year or beginning of next year, first quarter next year. There's also an interesting project coming up where we're collaborating with actors from Hollywood, the offshoot of the AMVCAs. You know, it's still hush hush, but looking forward to that. Yeah, really exciting projects coming up.
Awesome stuff, man. Congratulations on everything. I'm definitely rooting for you. You know I'm a fan. And I know you are going to... Just don't forget us when the Hollywood happens.
Thank you
officially. Thanks for being
Thank
here.
you for
today.
having me.
We'll take a quick break now and be right back. Please stay with us.
Get with you. Don't just stand there teasing me. Now it's time to show and prove.
Welcome back to the show. We're celebrating International Literacy Day and talking about education, which is a very hot topic in the country at the moment. If you are anywhere around Nigeria, you know what's been going on with our tertiary institutions with regards to ASU and the strikes. We're going to be talking with our special guest today to help us understand where we're headed with our educational system. Miriam Augie is here with us. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. Let's start with that before we go into the general context of education and where we're headed. What are your thoughts on how long this has lasted? This seems very recurring. Anybody who went to school in Nigeria has experienced a strike at some point. I spent an extra year and a half in my time, yes, because of strikes here. So I know exactly. But it's crazy that decades later we're still here and things are not resolved. Where do you think this leads us to?
For me, I believe it's rather unfortunate. And it shows that it's an institutional failure on the side of the government as well. Any country that really wants to prosper and really wants to grow has to take into consideration the seriousness of education and what education can do for us as a nation. So for us to have university students sitting down at home for how many months at home, over 3 months at home, not being able to go to school, it's really rather unfortunate. And I believe that the government needs to find a way to solve, in as much as, you don't really know what's going on, what the demands are on the side of ASU and why government is being as adamant as they are and ASU is being, but there has to be a middle ground. They have to be able to put into consideration everything that's going on and say to themselves, okay, for the benefit of the nation, for the benefit of our children, for the benefit of the future of this country. It's very important. In as much as a lot of youths are fed up with the system, a lot of them, yesterday I was in a taxi and an Uber driver, and he was telling us he has a master's degree in economics, he has a degree in economics as well, he's trying to pursue his PhD, but he's still an Uber driver. That's all he's able to do now. So there has to be a plain level ground for everybody, where you feel the nation is doing good to you. The nation is actually catering for your needs and actually putting you into considerations in their plans. So that's really what I think about.
There's an argument now going on about the need for government to step away from tertiary institutions. Most places around the world, for you to be able to go to university, you almost have to earn it in some way. Either you get a scholarship, or you get student loans, or whatever it is, or you get some financial help somewhere. Basic education is what people say is the right of the citizen. But even that is neglected now. You go around the country, public schools, primary, secondary are almost non-existent anymore. Private schools have taken over the entire sector. And it's the fear of what that means for the future, where education on that level is almost a privilege now. Do you agree with the argument that all those funds that keep going to you, tertiary institutions, should be diverted to basic education, and then if you want to get tertiary education, you have to earn it in some way? Is that a valid argument to be having at this point?
To a certain extent, I think it is. And why would I say that? We live in a society today where the ability to read and write makes all of the difference. Technology has made it so easy for you to be whatever it is that you want to be once you can read and write. Now you have a situation where at the basic level, and people tend to forget this, basic education is the responsibility of the local government and the state government. A lot of people think that responsibility is with the federal government, but in as much as it is with the local government and the state government, there is a complete neglect of that system. We did a baseline study recently of some schools within the northern part of the country, and you would find that in one school, there are about 3,000 students in a school. You have about 150 to 200 children in one classroom, right? Now you ask yourself, when we did the study, how much do they have to pay? Some of them have to pay PTO of 20 naira. That's all they have to pay, but some of them will tell you, we can't afford that 20. Yes, they will tell you we cannot afford that 20 naira. And so they leave their kids at home. But I believe that if you have that foundation, for all of us now, if you look at it, is the foundation. Is the foundation. I went to a public school. I'm a product of a public school, primary and secondary, and I believe that I turned out very well. I didn't learn how to speak when I went to university. Neither did I learn some of the basic things that I require for life in university. I learned it at the basic level. We had a skill acquisition when we were in primary school. We could learn how to farm. You had the basics, learning how to farm, learning how to make soap. You had the housekeeping that you would do. So I believe that if all of these funds, I do agree with that argument, that if all of these funds come down to the basic level, then what you have a strong foundation, and then you build on, because basic education is the foundation to which other structures are being built on. Not everybody needs a university degree.
We'll take a quick break and come back. Please stay with us.
Get with you. Don't just stand there teasing me. Now it's time to show and prove.
Welcome back to the show. What then happens to access for people who can never afford it? I mean, we know we live in a country where student loans will most likely not be a thing in the next decade or two, or even, I don't know how long. So what happens to those people who, I mean, private universities are already showing that there's sort of a difference now. If you want sort of a good tertiary education, you
Yes.
can afford it, you go to those places.
Yes.
There's already a huge gulf
Yes.
on a lot of levels. What happens to that if these public universities now join that train and more people are not able to get that education because of funding?
Well, like you said, for tertiary education, right, funding even at the federal level for all of these schools is a problem. A lot of people complain. I think there was a time a school in Osun State or Ogun State, they had a protest of an increase of fees. And even at this level, when you look at it, the fees that are being paid at the international level in comparison to our universities here, let's be honest, it's not enough to run a standard tertiary education. It is not enough. So at the end of the day, we're cutting, or should I say, paying Peter, what is it called?
You have to pay Paul.
Exactly,
Or robbing Peter to
robbing Peter to pay Paul in order to be able to get a certain level of. So I think what happens is, for those who are interested in tertiary education, the problem is that the Nigerian context in itself gives too much advantage to that university degree. You find that, and I do not like the comparison of Nigeria and the Western world. I really don't like that comparison, but I can put it into context in this certain situation where places in America and the UK where you graduate from high school, and it's such a big deal because graduating from high school actually gives you a certain opportunity, right? When you now graduate from university, you're more in a structured environment. It's more of a professional, so I believe that we have to find a way that we can do that for ourselves as well.
In a larger context now, the out-of-school conversation
Yes.
continues to happen. Nigeria is still at the bottom globally
Yes.
for out-of-school children. And it
Yes.
looks like every year we don't even try to move out of that.
Yeah.
Insecurity has made things even worse because
Absolutely.
especially the north has been the most affected.
Absolutely.
Why the numbers are that high.
Absolutely.
Are we getting out of this anytime soon? Do you see any move from government, state and federal, that shows you that this might be a different conversation in a year or two?
Let's even ask the question, Ebuka. We've been saying 10 point something million for the past 10 years. It's impossible.
It hasn't shifted.
No. It's not that it hasn't shifted. Do we even have the accurate data is the question, right?
It's probably more.
Exactly. And the data now is, UBEC has its own data. World Bank will give you a separate data. UNICEF will give you a separate data. Federal Ministry of Education would give you a separate data. I don't believe there is any concrete, in as much as a lot is being done. A lot is being done. But at the same time, it's almost like a drop in the ocean.
Yeah.
There needs to be a reorientation of mindset when it comes to education. Right, until we get that reorientation of mindset, we're 161 out of 159. 189, sorry, 161 Nigeria. Below Ethiopia, below Sudan, below Congo as a nation. We're such a blessed nation. And then you ask yourself, what is going on? Why are we where we are? Why are so many children being neglected? We currently are doing a literacy program in Abuja. And for those of you who know Abuja, there's a certain community next to Maitama called Katampe. And we wanted to start a literacy program for a Fulani community. This Fulani community has lived there for over 80 years. They've been in the FCT for over 80 years. And when we entered that community, 95% of them have never been to school. Of the 15% that have been to school, 18% cannot identify their alphabet or their numbers. So you ask yourself, where are we going? This is within the FCT. Then what happens when you go to the core northern side? What happens? Yeah, literacy level and education level in the south is a bit higher than the north, but there's still some areas that lack. Even within Lagos State itself, there's still some areas that actually lack.
What's the way out of this? Because government has tried so many things. They've tried the school feeding plan to attract people to come to schools. People argue that if security was not a problem, maybe people would go to school. Is it a money conversation or is it a mentality issue? I don't know.
I think it's both. It's intertwined, if you ask me. Yes, it's a money issue. And the second is the thought process behind it. Now, I'll give you an example. I have a daughter who's a hawker, right? She goes out, she hawks every day. She makes 5,000, 10,000, or even 2,000 a day, which is more than enough for them to feed their families in a day. And you're telling me that same daughter should go to school and sit through the day and not make a dime for me, when that is how I survive, right? Now, what is the benefit of that education when she's done? When you're looking at graduates telling you, I don't have employment. You're looking at most of these people that have graduated either becoming drug addicts or becoming a nuisance to the society. When you look at all of the insecurity that we're faced with today, it's a complete neglect, whether we want to face that reality or not. It's a complete neglect of the system and a complete neglect of the educational system as well. Now, these millions of children that are out of school, we do not know what will become of them in 20, 30 years. Now, let's imagine that UNICEF and Kano State did a recent report. And in that report, they have over 2.4 million Almajiri children in non-integrated. There's the difference. You have the integrated and you have the non-integrated. The integrated being that they have a certain level of literacy within the Almajiri system. And the non-integrated don't have at all. 2.4 million of them, non-integrated. What is going to be of those 2.4 million children in 10 years, in 20 years, in 30 years? So what is happening, it's now become a generational, almost like a generational curse. I don't have it. I don't see the benefit of it. Why should my child have it? So my child ends up not having it. That child probably will end up having another child that does not have it. The only difference would be you would have those children that have that tenacity, that will to say, I want to be different. But you see, those are the outliers. And they're probably 1 in 10 or 1 in 20. So there has to be a complete change of reorientation towards what education is, the benefit of education, and then the funding part as well. But I don't think the funding is as important as the mentality behind education.
So I know a lot of organizations are doing things to try and help with this funding conversation, or trying to help, generally with education. And I know you are part of something.
Yes,
you want to talk about it? Yeah.
Yes. We started the Walk in Their Shoes campaign, and what we're trying to do with the Walk in Shoes campaign is, I didn't mention earlier, we have a digital platform. So what we did with ILMI Children's Fund was to create a digital platform. We're currently working with 14 states and 28 local governments. So you can click onto our website. You'd be able to select a child, select the school that the child is going to. You have the option of actually selecting a public school or a private school. You can choose by age, you can choose by gender, you can choose by state, you can even choose by local government depending on what you want. There's a reporting system where once you go into, you open up an account. Once you open up your account, you're able to get your reports directly to your email as to how the child is doing. And if you want a personal touch and personal conversations with the children as well, you can actually go. So we started the Walk in Their Shoes campaign. The Walk in Their Shoes campaign, we're trying to see how we can fund 1,000 children across Nigeria. The campaign started in August, and we're trying to see how, like I said, we're working with 14 state and 28 local governments, and what we hope to do with this is actually expand throughout the nation and see how we can have a sponsored in every part of the nation.
That sounds really brilliant. What's the website?
www.ilmichildrensfund.org, and you can also find us on Instagram at ILMI Children's Fund.
So I just go there and I can adopt a child.
You can adopt a child, and you have all the details of the child in there. Wherever you can choose the state, choose wherever you want.
Awesome. Very grim message there, and I think we're going to end it at that, because I mean, it's nice to tell people the truth, and I think Nigerians sometimes need this harsh honesty.
Absolutely.
Because World Literacy Day should be marked with all seriousness in a place where, we have these issues. Thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you very much, Ebuka.
Like I always say, you can follow the conversation on social media. Please use the hashtag RobbieMinds when you send us a message. I'll see you next time.
Don't just stand there teasing me. Now it's